The idea of reloading your save is ubiquitous in the world of gaming. That experience of failing a boss fight and being sent back to your previous save point, ready to try again and fail again, is part of what makes the eventual victory, the progress to the next save point, so rewarding. But it's important to remember that, though we may move past a previous save, the mistakes we made fighting up to that point have not been erased. We keep the memories of those failures and eventual successes within us, long after when the save point has been deleted. This idea is even more prominent in the world within a world of visual novels. This genre, a fascinating middle ground between games and books, often prides itself in its winding narratives, ones that require about 50 different save points to navigate 50 different endings. Visual novels are not for everyone, that's for sure, but Nagatsuki Tappei, the author of the extremely popular isekai series Re:Zero, is clearly a fan of them. While watching Re:Zero, I found myself pleasantly surprised by the significant influence of visual novels on Nagatsuki's writing. How does Subaru's journey to another world, like so many other isekai protagonists, end up being so shockingly visual novel-esque in its approach to character and plot? The answer lies in this video's title, Reloading Your Save. And before we go any further, I'd like to emphasize that this video will contain spoilers for Re:Zero and a number of other visual novels. Hope you enjoy. There are several visual novel series that had an obvious aesthetic and thematic influence on the writing of Re:Zero, too many to list outright. One can speculate, for example, that the characters of Ram and Rem were based on the maid twins Kohaku and Hisui from Tsukihime, or that the work of Kinoku Nasu made a lasting impression on Nagatsuki Tappei, like it did so many others. This video, however, will focus on the influence of two visual novel series in particular, the second entry of the When They Cry series, Umineko, as well as the Muv-Luv trilogy. Nagatsuki has littered Re:Zero with references to the work of Ryokishi, the author of the When They Cry series, and whole swathes of Subaru's growth and characterization is indebted to Shirogane Takeru, the main character of Muv-Luv. Re:Zero might not seem to have much in common with either When They Cry or the Muv-Luv trilogy on the face of it. Umineko is predominantly a murder mystery, whereas Muv-Luv begins as a romantic comedy before expanding into a mecha-filled war epic. Their similarities to the isekai of Re:Zero is in the details. It's impossible to fully explain the plot of the When They Cry series without rambling on for hours, so for the sake of brevity, all you need to know is that Umineko is about witches. The antagonist turned tragic hero of Umineko is called Beatrice, the Golden Witch of Rokkenjima Island. She is a fickle, often cruel character, known for her trickery, sometimes offering out contracts which may seem appealing, but have vicious drawbacks. Now, you may have noticed that this description could just as easily apply to Echidna, the Witch of Greed in Re:Zero. Echidna's character design and ever-present butterfly motif is an obvious nod to Beatrice and her equally ever-present golden butterflies. There are episodes of Re:Zero titled The Witch's Tea Party, which mirrors the Witch's Tea Party sections in the visual novel Umineko. At first, I was only jokingly calling the character of Beatrice a reference to Beatrice in Umineko, but when a character named Frederica turned up as well, I knew that Nagatsuki was winking at the audience. These nods have been essentially confirmed by the author's references to the When They Cry series on his Twitter account, but the similarities go much deeper than mere aesthetic nods and references. Umineko's narrative is split into episodes, each of which function rather like a time loop. In each episode of Umineko, the protagonist Battler Shiramiya witnesses another repeat of the Rokkenjima massacre from October 4th to October 5th, with each loop illuminating aspects of the plot or the character's motivations both to Battler and the audience. Subaru's loops in Re:Zero follow much the same structure. Just like with Battler, the narrative focuses in on Subaru's despair at witnessing the ones he loved die in a repetitive time loop. Both Re:Zero and the When They Cry series maintain a tonal balance between extreme tragedy and despair, followed by equally extreme shonen-esque moments of emotional uplift, where the protagonist must overcome barriers in the world and in themselves. Ryokishi once said this of his writing philosophy in an interview with a French magazine. For me, a story should be like a roller coaster. Before writing a scene of pure despair, you have to go through scenes of hope. And indeed, when I write it, all of this greatly amuses me. In Re:Zero, we see the influence of this roller coaster balancing of despair and joy, defeat and victory, itself reflected in the central conceit so common to gaming and visual novels, reloading the save. As the saying goes, there can be no victory without defeat. No scene better encapsulates the influence of the When They Cry series on ReZero than this sequence from the second part of Season 2. Here, during Amelia's trials in the Sanctuary, the powerful Witch of Vanity tricks Beetlejuice into killing Fortuna by switching their places at the last moment. This is a near-carbon copy of a sequence from Umineko, where the demon Garp tricks George and Jessica into killing each other through the same means. While the influence of the When They Cry series on ReZero can be felt in aesthetic, structure and tone, the influence of the Muv-Luv trilogy can mostly be felt in characterization. My personal opinion is that, although the second season of ReZero had some real high points, and the currently airing third season shows promise, the show's peak thus far came in its third story arc. In this arc, Subaru reaches arguably his lowest point, struggling with his performative, hopeless attempts to avert the witch's cult attack and prevent Amelia's death. This culminates in the show's infamous 18th episode, which, other than single-handedly igniting a shipping war, showed Subaru trying to give up and elope with Rem, running away from his problems. He admits all his self-loathing and sense of inaction in a long rant, only to be brought back from the brink by Rem, who not only encourages him not to give up, but sets him back on the path to accepting himself. The trajectory of Subaru's arc, other than being excellent character development, had a strange sense of familiarity to me while I was watching it unfold, and it was only afterwards that I realised why. Subaru's arc is eerily similar to Shirogane Takeru's arc in the opening half of Muv-Luv Alternative. Takeru's journey in the Muv-Luv trilogy also involves a structural time loop. Takeru is forced to repeat the events that see his friends killed and the Earth destroyed in a war with the alien threat known only as the Beta. In the third game, Muv-Luv Alternative, Takeru gives up and flees to his original universe, or time loop if you will, as Subaru attempts to do in ReZero's 18th episode. The role that Rem plays in bringing Subaru back from the brink has echoes of Mitsurugi Meia's role in Takeru's arc, a heroine who the protagonist describes as his guiding light, and who, rather like Rem, also ends up unfortunately passed over in favour of another love interest. Meia's role is much darker than Rem's, however, and the general content of Takeru's road to giving up in Muv-Luv Alternative is just as nightmarish, if not more so, than Subaru's. The sweeping likenesses between Takeru and Subaru's character arcs may be coincidental, though it wouldn't surprise me if this was a direct or subconscious influence, considering the stature of the Muv-Luv trilogy amongst visual novel fans, and Nagatsuki's self-evident enjoyment of them. The time loop has proven to be an enduringly popular storyline for visual novel writers. Both the When They Cry and Muv-Luv trilogy use variations on this narrative, as shown in this video, and Steins Gate remains the title people most associate with the subgenre in the West. There is no limit on the length of a visual novel. In fact, excessive length is practically celebrated amongst hardcore fans of the subgenre. This gives the time loop a sense of depth, detail and nuance it might not receive in another medium. The ability to incorporate different routes and endings, to reload your save, makes the visual novel uniquely suited to the time loop narrative. ReZero's return by death mechanic is just the near-omnipotent power that every visual novel reader has experienced, only realised as a curse. In life, the ability to return by death, to reload our save, to undo our mistakes, seems infinitely desirable. Why wouldn't we want an ability like that? What ReZero seems to suggest, like so many other great visual novels, is that the ability to reload your save, like Takeru in Muv-Luv or Battler in Umineko, is less important than the ability to acknowledge your mistakes. We might not be able to return by death, but we can learn what we did wrong, and do better next time. Escaping a repetitive time loop is simply the human experience of growth. A save point might become redundant, but for Subaru, the memory of the mistakes he made remain, and that is what drives real change, not just reloading your save.